going to speak about how my career in research has benefited my recovery. So I'm a postdoctoral researcher on the beautiful campus in the centre, that is the University of Stirling, and I had an acquired brain injury 18 months ago while I was away on a work trip in Brazil. So I contribute to knowledge of insect pest control whilst maintaining sustainable agriculture. To do this, I make hypotheses, I collect data and interpret the results of the questions I have. I share and disseminate my knowledge in conference presentations, through my teaching, and of course through publications. I joined an international collaboration in 2018, and I went to Brazil in November 2019 to collect insects for my experimental design. But while I was there, I was a passenger that was in a car, and that was in a road traffic collision. I was put into a medically induced coma for approximately 1 month, but I woke up about a week after my sedation medication was ceased. So an MRI revealed that I had extensive right side intrapharyngeal hemorrhage and also a diffuse axonal injury, which was evidenced by the punctate microhemorrhage in my left frontal lobe and basal ganglia. So I think it's fair to say my brain looked pretty wrecked. I had a lot of physical impairments. I had very poor midline orientation. I had reduced posture stability. I had a tendency to I had a very overactive right side. I had reduced range of motion and sensation on my left limbs and increased tone in both of the left limbs. And the tone has been very problematic so far. I also had reduced working memory and orientation, and I had mild to moderate cognitive communication impairment and dysphonia. But you know what? I think my background in research has really helped my recovery. And let me just explain why. I think as a researcher, I'm very curious, and I've always got lots of questions. I'm not fazed by not knowing the answer to things. And I'll be very honest, I knew nothing about acquired brain injury until it happened to me, and I had lots of questions about it. I think as a researcher, you tend to have quite an analytical approach. And I think that I've applied myself to my research, which has given me the knowledge, the insight, and the ability to analyze my way through situations, which has really helped me plan my way through my traumatic brain injury recovery. Now, research also requires a lot of resilience. This gave me the confidence and the patience to persevere through this recovery because it's long and ongoing. So it requires a lot of resilience and a hell of a lot of persistence. I also refuse to be told where my limits lie and I demand my independence, and it's been very central to my recovery. Of course, research is very competitive. And this is a good lesson in strength and confidence to battle on, even though a lot of the time I'm only competing against myself. I've managed to replace my experimental repetition with neuro-rehabilitation repetitive practice. Of course, repetition can be very frustrating at times, but it's the fastest way to activate neuroplasticity. I was in Brazil to research the evolution of insect adaptation, and I found similarly my brain can adapt and rewire new connections around the brain. You know, with science, there's an awful lot of certainty. The parameters of experiments can be controlled. You can't know the outcome, but you can have a hypothesis on the end result. And I yearn to set boundaries and expectations around my recovery, you know, because humans really thrive on certainty, and very few of us are ready to attack the void of the unknown. But this is what we're faced with as acquired brain injury survivors. And my friend highlighted Mark Pollock's outlook, and he says, expect problems as we explore possibilities. And my friend John, he said, you know what, this guy is a man, this guy is on an expedition in life, exploring the unknown and pushing the boundaries of what's possible. And that was really inspiring to me as a brain injury survivor. I said, I'm going to do that as well. And I did have goals for my recovery. I wanted to dance again, I wanted to walk again, I wanted to get back to research. But unfortunately, a neuropsychologist put a real downer on those goals. And they told me that walking was a bit unrealistic. And you know what, in response to that, I decided to do my own meta-analysis. It's certainly not a publishable standard, it's total nonsense, but it was really helpful because it made me see the range of possibilities for recovery from a traumatic brain injury. And from that, I quickly understood that, of course, it's very difficult to know how people will recover from traumatic brain injury. But I found out that insight, cognitive reserve, and physical fitness all played a positive role. And I saw all of those characters in myself. But that range of possibilities also geared me up, because it helped me preparing for managing for loss, as well as acceptance of my injury and finding my own new place in the world. And I really think that neuropsychologists really missed a trick by just saying, oh, very unrealistic, not giving me a range and preparing me for, as I said, finding my own new place in the world. And their opinion also very much contradicted the answers I got from a multidisciplinary team when we had meetings. I mean, I asked them so many difficult questions, but they were always very honest with me, and they said it's a little bit too early to tell. And I mean, it really was. This is back in December 2019, and it really was too early to tell. You know what? I did the usual when I don't know the answer to something. I did my own research, and I found that while I was trying to figure out how I could regain mobility after traumatic brain injury, and I found passive stretching and different strengthening exercises that could aid my arm, my hand, and my leg mobility that I could do while I was bedbound and I was chairbound at the time. And they really helped. And then what I started to do was collect data on myself. So I could map my progress. I could start looking for trends to form a discussion around my recovery. You know, what was working, what wasn't. Rehab games can be so incremental and minor, sometimes they seem almost non-existent. But having such amount of detailed data on myself, you know, I could review it, I could start graphing my progress, and it really helped me be able to communicate with my clinicians elements of my recovery that concerned me. I mean, I really collected data on everything, every interaction I had, how they made me feel, my mood, my tone, my fatigue, the number of steps I took, my weight, even the number of hours I slept at night. And from collecting all that data, I started to calculate correlations between each component to monitor the cause and the effect. The last graph is very important because I discovered that clinicians that included me explained the motivation behind every activity. And when we had these really nice, inquisitive conversations that included insight for me, you know, I'm the person living with brain injury. I really found that my therapy sessions were much more successful. Now, clinicians might know all the facts about traumatic brain injury, but they don't know the challenges and frustrations that we face every day. And I think that my research really highlights the ability to listen and empathize are fundamental neurological clinician skills. Now, acquired brain injury recovery requires Herculean amounts of willpower to persist with the tenacity to remain motivated for a long time when the finish line keeps moving. Of course, healing isn't linear, and there are numerous hurdles on the way there. And I really think that collecting data on myself helped me prepare for and analyze each of these hurdles. One massive hurdle was COVID-19 kicking off. I couldn't remain in acute hospital, so there was discussion of discharging me to a nursing home. And of course, we know that's because there's very limited post-acute inpatient neurorehabilitation services in Ireland. But by a stroke of luck, if you'll excuse the pun, I got more timely rehabilitation. There was discussion of sending me to NRH in July, but I got to go to the National Orthopaedic Hospital, the Rehabilitation Unit in the National Orthopaedic Hospital in March. And I think that timely rehabilitation was really, it's meant my recovery has been very successful. Another positive is I got more intense rehabilitation. I think that's because there was social distancing on the wards. So there were less patients, so it was more intense rehabilitation. And then Karen has talked about this already, but I really think that one big positive for me was technology. I used my iPad a lot for video calls, listened to audiobooks when I was too tired to read. And my physio in the acute hospital told me about this really cool impairment-based repetitive exercise program called REPS. And that's this one here. And that was really handy because during the COVID restrictions, our therapy sessions got stopped, and that allowed me to continue my physical strengthening from my chair in the rehabilitation hospital. But I do think adapting to COVID at the time, I mean, I know the staff were completely overwhelmed by, well, the nonsense surrounding COVID, but I think it did need some work because there was numerous brain training apps that only found out after restrictions got stopped. And these would have been really helpful to increase my focus, improve my memory, and problem solving. But because I didn't use them, because I didn't know about them, I used to engage with things like online Scrabble and online crosswords, because I remember that my granny used to always say these are the things that kept her mind sharp as she got older. But then, and I think Karen has touched on this already, most older patients didn't have access to devices and they didn't have the training to know how to use them. But I really think both would have made the COVID restrictions much more bearable. And for one reason in particular, because family are central to a patient's recovery when it comes to a neurological injury. We're in a change of life situation and being socially isolated does not work. I only got 3.5 hours visits in 7 months. And the positive attitudes and the reinforcement from my family members inspired me to commit to my rehabilitation. It really helped me to adapt to the new physical challenges and limitations I was faced with. But the lack of face-to-face family support and encouragement was very challenging because my family members know me best. And again, I don't want to be too negative, but I kind of feel that COVID really shone a light on how under-resourced and understaffed the HSC are. That's something that really needs to change so they can adequately deal with big changes like the pandemic. And I think that, the effects of isolation were polarizing. And I firsthand experience where I see a lot of patients, they were so isolated and their motivation just went out the window and they kind of gave up. But for me, I found it to be really motivating and I really wanted to work harder to get home sooner. So between sessions, I enacted movements that would make me stronger. So I practiced things like sit to stand, or I did range of movement stretching as much as I could by myself. Well, let's get back to the research side of things. I know not everybody can or will collect data on themselves, but data are the jigsaw pieces that we put together to see the bigger pieces. Everybody's recovery is unique to them, and I think collecting this kind of detailed data on each person can be very beneficial. I have an idea to develop a algorithm to create a flowchart for recovery based on that individual's recovery data that can complement a bespoke patient recovery plan. Here's my email if there are any researchers out there that would like to chat about the data I've collected, and I'm continuing to collect, and maybe we can do something interesting with it. Thank you very much to Grania for inviting me to talk today. And thank you to all the other speakers. It's been really interesting so far.